view. It's not a million, that's a billion. That's 2,000 million views. So thanks for watching my videos. Keep watching. I'm helping everybody out during the show here. Ask your questions on the live chat on YouTube Live. I pick the best ones and answer them. First one, Damien Passur says, Scotty, how you doing? I got a 91 Mercedes-Benz 190E 2.3 automatic with 155,000 miles. It's in great shape. I change the oil every 5,000 miles. How long do you think it'll last? Well, Mercedes-Benz is often turned into endless money pits, but you have a rather interesting one. You got a 190E 2.3 four-cylinder engine. They're not particularly popular in the United States because they were kind of underpowered. They're a heavy vehicle with a smaller engine. But that said, if you love it, keep changing the oil, it might last a long time. It's not all that crazy new stuff with GDI fuel injection, with turbochargers. It's a much more basic vehicle. And it's probably made in Deutschland. The ones made in Germany are made better. So it might last quite some time. I used to have customers have those things, had 250. They're still running pretty good. Next question. Emmanuel Aponte said, what are your thoughts on a 2006 Matrix with 92,000 miles? Well, if you're talking about buying it, pick it up fast. Those things can go 3, 4, 500,000 miles. 92,000 miles is nothing. They get phenomenal gas miles. Basically, it's a Toyota Corolla with a small SUV body stuck on the frame. Originally, they called them Toyota Corolla Matrixes. Then they just called them Toyota Matrixes. I've got an '07 thing that might run forever. They're really well made. They get phenomenal gas mileage too. Next question. Life and Sports Talk with Jake says, Scotty, me and the wife can't agree on a van. I see a lot of Honda Odysseys, cheap, $3,000, 150,000 miles and up. What would you buy one? I'm seeing Siennas for $5,000 with 185,000. Okay, well here's the thing. The Siennas are 5 times the vans of the Odysseys. The Odysseys had engine problems, cams went bad, transmissions blew up on them, electronic problems. As they age, they're not very good vans. Now, if you bought a brand new Odyssey, usually they last for quite some time, but I don't see any Odyssey vans with 3, 4, 500,000 miles on them unless they've had the transmissions replaced once or twice, the engines worked on. I've seen Siennas with 500,000 miles, engines and trannies are never touched. They're so much better built. You're going to pay more, but they're a much better vehicle. There's no arguing that whatsoever. That's why you can find so many cheap Odysseys there. They're well made. Next question. William Bergman said, Scotty, me and my grandpa have a 1971 Buick Skylark convertible. We work on it together. What are some of the common problems? All right, well, it's an old vehicle. That thing is what? 52 years old. It's ancient. So many things can break on it. Now, of course, the weakest thing is the automatic transmission. It's a 71 Skylark convertible, so I'm assuming it's a V8. Most of them were V8s then. They're excellent engines. The transmissions are the weakest points to them. The main thing you got to worry about with the 71 is rust. If you live anywhere where they use salt in the winter, it's going to rust away. They just rust because they didn't have very good anti-rusting back in the 70s. If you live where there isn't rust, great. You don't have to worry about it. But let's say the frame's starting to rust, you hit it with a hammer, instead of going bang, bang, it goes crunch and it dents in. It's on its last legs then. Don't put any money into it if it's rusting out. Next question. Jake says, is it worth getting a Sienna at 185,000 miles for $6,000? I imagine Sienna would last up to 300,000. If it was maintained, yeah. I mean, my son bought a brand new one last year. I think they paid close to $60,000. You're only talking about 6. So, even if it only lasted another 100,000 miles, you'd be getting your money's worth compared to what modern vehicle costs. Don't trust anybody. Have a guy like me check it out before you buy to make sure it wasn't wrecked or flooded or had serious problems. But other than that, they're great vans. They can last a long time. Next question. Hackers caught red-handed, said Scotty. I got a Mazda 3 2009. I get white smoke. Mechanic says I need a new engine head. They said because the engine's aluminum, it won't hold. They want to swap the whole engine. What are your thoughts? All right. Well, what's the mileage on the engine? Let's say the engine's got 180,000 miles. I'd put another engine in. I would not start fixing it. You don't put Band-Aids on engines. If the head's worn, the block's worn, the pistons are worn, the crankshafts are worn, everything is worn. Do not Band-Aid an old car. If you're going to keep it, do the whole engine or get rid of it and get another vehicle. I've had people over the years try to, oh, it just needs a head gasket. They put a head gasket on, and then 6 months later, it blows something else that starts smoking, and then they got to put in piston rings. It's endless. If you're going to fix an engine, fix it right. If not, drive it till it drops and then junk it or put a used engine in it. Next question. Parker says, Scotty got a 2014 Ford Fusion, 140,000 miles. Should I keep driving it or sell it? All right. Well, the Fusions were decent vehicles. They're called Fusions because it was a fusion of Volvo and Ford technology. Back then, Ford owned Volvo, put some good Volvo technology into their cars. Now, 140,000 miles. Does it burn any oil, and does the transmission run good and not slip much? If so, keep driving it. You're not going to get that much money for a Fusion with 140,000 miles on it. But if you're curious, put it up for sale. See what you get offered. If you get offered a lot of money, take it. Then see if you can find a good used Toyota or Honda that'll last a lot longer than that will. So take all that into consideration and make a wise choice. Double Plus on Good says, Scotty, what do you think of the newer engines with port and direct injection? Yeah, some of the Toyotas are made that way. They work great when they're working, but it's new technology. It is a level of complexity that's insanity. It's not like, oh, well, it starts up on the port, then it switches to the GDI injection. No, it switches between them all the time while you're running. Now, they run phenomenal. The new Toyota ones, they get phenomenal gas mileage. But what's going to happen when they age? I generally would imagine things will break that normally don't break, and it will cost a fortune to fix. Give you a perfect example. Ages ago, Ford came out with their EcoBoost V6 engines with direct injection with 2 turbochargers. Lots of power, good gas mileage. Guess what's happening now? They're getting old, they're falling apart and breaking, and they cost a fortune to repair because that fuel injection system is so complex with the dual turbos. And the GDI, it is just complex as can be. And you either junk the car or spend a fortune fixing it. So these new ones, hey, it's interesting technology, but as they age, I imagine they're going to get some very expensive problems. And then you're going to wish it didn't have 2 separate fuel injection systems on the car that actually work in tandem. Next question. Emery Young says I got 89 Dodge Ram Charger, 318 motor, over 400,000 miles. Should I keep it or sell? Well, realize that's becoming a collector's item. People love those Ram Chargers. The 318s are excellent engines. You could keep fixing that thing forever, or at least as long as they keep selling gasoline. It'll be quite some time before we switch to electric cars or whatever. So I would keep it, and then if it needed an engine, put an engine. Needed a transmission, put a transmission. They don't build them like that anymore. They don't build them where you can fix them, and they're simple to work on. I would definitely keep it if I had one. The only reason I would get rid of one is, let's say you lived in Michigan or Maine or Alaska, and it was all rusted out from the salt in the road in the winter, and the frame was all coming apart. If that's the case, get rid of it. You can't fix them when the frames are all broken. You'd have to do a whole frame restoration, take everything off the frame, get another frame, put it on, and it's not worth that kind of money. So as long as the frame is solid, I'd keep it. Next question. Deep Patel says, why won't my 2012 Honda Civic accelerate? Many reasons you can lose acceleration. Always start basic and work your way up. Don't start complex. Sounds simple. Check the spark plugs. Maybe they're worn out. All right? Check the air filter. Maybe it's clogged up. Check the fuel filter. Replace it. Maybe it's clogged up. That normally fixes it. If not, it can be a clogged catalytic converter that we mechanics can check with a pressure gauge. It could be a weak fuel pump, which we would also check with the pressure gauge. Could even be computer electronic. But start out with a simple thing. Spark plugs, filters. A lot of times that's all it is. I often fix many cars that way. Don't think it's always the worst case scenario. Always start with the simple things first. Next question. Sock'em79 says, Scotty, happy to catch the stream. What are your thoughts on the new Mazda 3s? I like them because a few years back, Toyota invested even more in Mazda. I believe they own 20-something% of the company. They're building Toyotas and Mazdas on the same assembly line in a factory, I believe it's in Alabama. So they've got Toyota technology now, a lot more than they used to. Used to be Mazdas had horrible automatic transmissions. No, now they've got much better transmissions. Their engines used to blow head gaskets. They really don't anymore if you take care of them. The deal they got going with Toyota really has helped Mazda out. They're much better than they used to be. Well, he says, how can I diagnose a misfire on a car without a scan tool? Well, let me tell you something. All right? Get a scan tool. You can go out and buy a $29 scan tool. Right? And then you plug it in. Let's say it says misfire cylinder number 2. Then you take the ignition coil on number 2, put it on number 4, and put 4 on number 2. Erase the code, start it up. If it now says misfire cylinder number 4, you know it's the ignition coil. You gotta have a scan tool to make it fast. Like I said, you can get one that does basic data like that for 29 bucks. I show one of my videos, it's an Ansel ANCEL, it's like 29 bucks. Works perfectly fine for basic stuff like that. Buy it, it's worth it. Could save you a ton of money. Mechanics charge $150 to $200 an hour labor at the average shop today. This tool costs you 29 bucks. Buy it. It's worth its weight in gold. Quentin Gaiman says, Scotty, what can you do about little rust patches? Well, realize one thing. As Neil Young sang, rust never sleeps. Steel rusts from the inside out. Once you got a hole, it's rusted out. What you have to do, if you want to fix it correctly, is cut out the rusted area, weld in steel, then sand it down, Bondo it, and paint it, right? Now, if you just want it to look good for a short period of time, you can use fiberglass. You can scratch it down, put fiberglass, and then paint over that. But it'll continue to rust and eventually fall apart. The only way you can get rid of it's like cancer. You got to cut it out, right? But if you want to cover it up and paint it, go ahead. And then, a year or so later, it'll come out again. You have to do it all over again. Or if you're going to sell a car and you don't care, what the heck, just patch it with Bondo, paint it, and sell it. A lot of people do that. That's why I tell people, when you're buying a used car, bring a magnet. Then you can put a magnet all over. You get to a part where the magnet falls off, that's plastic. Bondo, don't buy the car because, it's all rusted underneath. IS 250S says, when will used car prices go down? Well, from what I've seen, they're actually starting to come down. I have people bring me cars now, and the prices are lower than they were 2 or 3 months ago. It looks like they're starting to change a little bit. Now, the real kicker will be when the recession comes, they'll drop like a stone because people will be getting cars foreclosed on. They can't afford the monthly payments, and there's just going to be a flood of used cars on the market. So if you can wait, still wait. I think I'm going to adopt faster in a little while when things start to heat up and people stop paying their payments and the market is flooded with these return cars that were either leased or the people bought them and can't pay their payment, they're turning them in. Once the market's flooded, the price goes down. Devin K said, Scotty, what do you think of a 216 Nissan Micra? All right. They're tiny little cars, right? Tiny, tiny little cars. Now, I rented one once, and my wife hated it. She thought it was one of the worst cars she was ever in. But, in Asia, they drive a lot of micro cars, and they like them, I mean, they ride kind of bumpy, but they get good gas mileage, and they're okay. They'll last a while. Of course, they're not powerful. They're tiny little engines. But if you want a tiny little car, they're not horrible cars, you know? They're not horrible cars. But, I mean, if I was going to get a tiny car, I'd get a Toyota or a Honda tiny car. I wouldn't get a Nissan tiny car because they're not nearly as well made as the Toyotas and the Hondas. Next question. Lionel Rivera says, Scotty, what's your opinion on Mitsubishi recalling all 2000 to 2022 Outlander Sports to reprogram the CVT for revving at high speeds and destroying engines? All right. For years, if you ever watch my advice, I've told people do not buy Mitsubishi Outlanders. They look cool, they're big, they're fun to drive, but they fall apart when they age. They always have. I don't care if you're talking about one from decades ago or a modern one. Now, when they reprogram them to fix them, that's just a Band-Aid. They're too cheap to actually fix them correctly. If they did, it would cost them a fortune. Imagine. There's 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 years of cars. They're going to have to rebuild all the trannies who would cost them a fortune. So they're thinking, oh, we're going to reprogram. I've seen that so often. Chrysler's done it for years. Oh, we have transmission problems. Bring it in. We'll reprogram. Well, I've had it done to my customers' cars. I'll reprogram, bring back them in. They work just as bad as they did before, maybe a little bit better, but not much. I mean, if it's recalled, you get it for free, go right ahead. But my advice, since the market is still relatively high, sell the stupid thing and get a Toyota or a Honda, because they aren't very well made. Mitsubishi is not a big car company. It's a huge multinational corporation. Mitsubishi made the Mitsubishi Zeros that attacked Pearl Harbor. You know, they've been around a long time. Cars is small potatoes to them. They don't care that much about cars. Consequently, they don't make such great cars either. I would never, ever buy one. Next question. Nathaniel Austin, Scotty, are the Dodge Pentastar 3.6 liter V6 engines any good? What are your thoughts? The 2019 Caravan my wife and I bought. All right, well, it's only 3 years old. The newer ones are better than the earlier ones. The earlier ones were plagued like mad with problems. They seem to be making them better to some extent. But realize, that's a 2019. That baby was built when it was Fiat Chrysler, and their quality was going down the toilet. I would not own one. I would not own a Caravan either. I mean, the old joke goes, how come you can carry 8 people in a Dodge Caravan? It's because 7 of them can push while the 8th one drives it, and you can get to the nearest garage and get it fixed. I would not buy one, but you've got to take care of it and pray that your engine lasts better than the earlier generation Pentastars that did have problems. Change your oil every 5,000 miles with full synthetic oil. Heed my warning and do that religiously. Carlos Eduardo A says, are Subaru Foresters any good? Now, I'm not a gigantic Subaru fan, but I have customers with Subaru Foresters. They love them. They absolutely love them. They're one of the safest cars out there. A guy, when I was in Rhode Island, a fireman from New York came, and he bought a brand new Forester because he saw it was rated so high in safety, and he was an EMT fireman. He dealt with car wrecks and people being killed all the time. He wanted a safe car for him and his wife. So that's what he got, and he loves it. So, hey, they're not bad. They're not bad vehicles. And they can last quite some time. If you want an all-wheel drive vehicle like that, it's a pretty good choice, really. Next question. Kevin Durrett said, what do you think of the rumored Mazda Wankel hybrid? You know, I think it's just a myth. They've been talking about that for ages. Because here's the problem with Wankel engines. Wankel engines pollute. They're rotary engines. The rotors spin. They're triangular rotors. At each corner of the apex, they're seals. They always go bad, and they pollute. They're all worried about pollution, and the Wankels are polluting engines. There's no way out of it. When they first made them, and they thought, oh, great, Mazda had a Mazda Cosmos, right? Little engine can run on anything they showed in their ads. They could run on perfume. Well, they could run on any type of fuel. The only problem was, no matter what kind of fuel you put in them, they're tremendous gas hogs, and they burnt fuel like mad. What's the point of having a little engine that's got a lot of power that's a gas hog? Plus, they pollute more. So I don't think they'll ever make it big, especially the United States. I don't think they'll ever be able to meet the EPA pollution laws. Next question. Tom Baldwin said, I saw 76 Porsche 911 yesterday. Mint. The guy said it's a 6-cylinder boxer. Sounded nice. Yeah, they sound nice. Let your neighbor have one. You can listen to the nice sound. You don't have to fix it yourself. Those things are endless money pits as they age with high mileage. They're air-cooled performance engines. You sit around idling, not enough air, the engines overheat and burn themselves out early. You know, they're fun sports cars to drive around in, but I mean, a 6-cylinder air-cooled boxer engine is antique technology. That's just antique technology. And they're interesting, you know, they're fun to drive. It's like guys, they like antique motorcycles. Okay, yeah, they look cool and they sound cool, but they're always breaking down. Me, give me a modern motorcycle that doesn't break down, and I'll be a happy camper. I don't want something that's breaking all the time. I want something that sounds cool, goes fast, and isn't going to break down. I don't want something that's going to break down all the time. And those Porsches are notorious for breaking down as they age, and the parts cost a fortune too. But they do sound good. Next question. AJ Stuff says, I got a Lexus IS 200. Check engine light came on, PO 420. Mechanic says the oxygen sensor and the cats are fine. Well, an oxygen sensor causes small misfires. It can. You know, I don't know how good your mechanic is. There's literally 20 different things that can cause a PO 420 inefficient catalytic converter. There are so many things that can cause that. Now, he says he knows. Fine. Tell him, replace it. But I'm not going to pay if it doesn't fix the problem. See how strong his opinion is. If he says, okay, great. If he says no, don't go to him. Because to some extent, he's probably guessing. There's so many things that can go wrong, and there are so many tests you'd have to put on a freeze frame, a oscilloscope, analyze stuff, do a smoke test, do a compression leak down test of the engine, all kinds of tests to see why you have a misfire in PO 420, because there's over a couple dozen things that can cause that. But if he says, yeah, sure, right, have him do it. If it doesn't fix it, don't pay him. See if he stands behind his diagnosis then. Next question. John Doe says, 04 Volkswagen Passat TDI, 98,000 miles. Is it a good buy or not? Well, I'm not a Volkswagen fan, but 2 days ago, I just fixed a Volkswagen TDI. It was an 03. He had 380,000 miles on that sucker, and it still ran like a top. So, hey, you know, they can last. The only thing is, when they break, most guys don't work on diesels. I've worked on diesels in the past, so I didn't mind working on this Volkswagen diesel. Made an interesting video, too. But I used to work on a lot of Mercedes diesels. Little do you know, but in the 1980s, early 90s, the Mercedes turbo diesel were their biggest selling cars in the United States. Everybody loved them, so I learned a lot about it. I would buy a Volkswagen, but if you can get one cheap with that kind of mileage, it might last quite some time. Don't overpay, though. It isn't worth a whole bunch of money. Americans hate diesels, so you can always get them cheap. Next question. Rocket Chip Gaming says, any thoughts on new Volvos? All kinds of thoughts. You know, they're now owned by the Chinese, right? And they say they're only going to make hybrid and electric cars from now on. They're not going to make regular diesel gasoline cars. Who knows if they're really going to do it or not, but generally that tells you they're thinking about it, so I wouldn't buy a new Volvo diesel or gasoline car because you might not be able to get parts for it in the future. You know, you might not. Now, if you're talking about a hybrid or electric one like the Polestar and you want to spend all that money, go right ahead. They're, you know, decent built vehicles, and now a lot of them are made in China, so they're not European snobmobiles where they don't give you any information and they're overpriced. The prices have come down and making them in China, so maybe not that bad of an idea, but I wouldn't buy a gasoline or diesel one unless it was dirt cheap because you might not be able to get parts for it in the future. Next question. Oh my God, it's Jose. Says, hey, my car makes a ticking noise coming from time assembly. I replace VVT solenoids, timing gears, sprockets, lifters, ignition coils, and spark plugs. Loss of power and miles. along with PO420. All right, well, you got a noise, right? You changed a lot of stuff, right? Lifters and everything. Did you measure the cam? I would have measured the cam. Could be your cam's just worn out. You replaced all those parts, but the main thing that spins is the cam. It's still making a noise, and you're not saying what kind of vehicle it is, but let's say it is a variable valve timing. Well, variable valve timing, they move to change the variation of the valves, right? Could be the VVT system makes a noise. A lot of the Toyotas, the VVT systems make noise. A lot of Fords with those 5.4 V8, 3-valve V8 engines, they make a tick of noise. It can be coming from the variable valve time. You know, they call it cam phasers on Fords. They had to give it a different name, but it could be that too. Next question. Memem Sabir says, Scotty, my 2018 Highlander's giving a message, braking power low. Toyota dealer said DTC 1241 and skid control ECU battery problem, wants to charge $1,200 plus to fix it. Well, that is the problem with these cursed modern technology cars. You've got anti-skid control. You probably got other traction control systems on the car. You got a problem in that system. Hardly anybody's going to know how to work on that thing outside of a Toyota dealer with a Toyota dealer computer, and they're going to charge you up the wazoo. So try at least to find a mechanic who really knows Toyotas, who's got a good Toyota scan tool to look at it and see what he says. It could very well be you got a problem with the skid control computer. Lots of things can do it, but don't always start with, oh, it's the computer, it's the most expensive part. Have another guy check it out and see what he says. That's the problem with all this added on crap. That's why I love my Toyota Matrix. It was made in Cambridge, Ontario. It doesn't, it's an 07, but it doesn't even have ABS. So I don't have to worry about all that ABS control stuff. It doesn't have ABS. Regular brakes, stops perfectly fine. I know how to drive, and I don't have to spend any money on any of that crap, because the only thing that's going to go wrong, you either get a leak, the pads wear out, or the brake master cylinder is worn and you replace it because it's going to the floor. That's about all that ever goes wrong. None of that computer garbage. Next question. 805 video says, 1964 Mercury Comet, should I sell it? Interesting enough, I got whacked by a 64 Mercury Comet. First wreck, I had my Opel, my first car, and I just got it fixed, the fender fixed, because GM was on strike and I couldn't get a fender. Finally got a fender, got it fixed. And my years later to become wife was riding with her sister in a 64 Mercury Comet. I was leaving Cug Island in Niagara Falls, and for some reason her sister forgot something, and she made a U-turn right in front of me, and I thought, well, I'll turn to the right to get out of the way. I didn't know she was making a U-turn. She was making a U-turn. She was going the whole way, so then she rammed into me, smashed it in. Now, strangely enough, if it's not rusted out and it's still got a good solid frame, people are starting to collect those things. Look at the market. Maybe you can sell it for good money if somebody wants to make a collectible. Maybe you want to fix it up and keep it. What do you want to do with it? And of course, that all depends. Like I always say, if the frame's rotten, it's worth nothing, and get rid of the stupid thing. But if the frame's not rotten, somebody might give you some money. A lot of those cars are starting to go up in value. You'd be surprised. You'd be really surprised. Well, that's it for today. Realize every day of the week I upload 2 videos on the Scotty Kilmer channel on YouTube. So subscribe, hit the notification bell. And I'm here on Thursdays at 1 o'clock in the afternoon Central Time on YouTube Live answering your questions. I'm also on YouTube Live Saturday morning at 10 a.m. Central Time. So thanks for the 2 billion YouTube views. Here's to the next 2.